Hello folks, it's the Pace Chaser again. Welcome to another one of my videos. This is the first of a series looking at photographs of the buses and coaches of East Yorkshire Motor Services. And in this first part we're going to look at the classic days before the formation of the National Bus Company in 1969. There are a couple of photographs from after that period, but they are relevant to what we're looking at. So first of all, a bit of history. East Yorkshire Motor Services was formed in August 1926. It was a subsidiary of the British Automobile Traction Company, or BAT for short, and it was formed to take over the businesses of Hull and District Motor Services Limited and Lee and Bueller Limited. The dark blue and primrose livery of Lee and Bueller was adopted for the new company, and the fleet taken over was numbered from 1, and all subsequent editions, new and second-hand, simply took the next available number in the series, and this led to single-deck buses, double-deckers and coaches all being mixed up. This system lasted until the 1970s, when the various types were split into different series. Various other local companies were purchased, allowing East Yorkshire to become the dominant operator in the East Riding, although most services within the city of Hull were provided by Hull Corporation. The ownership of EY went from BAT through Tilling BAT, with some of the shares held by the London North Eastern Railway, and eventually to BET, or the British Electric Traction Group. The LNER shares passed to British Railways and then to the Transport Holding Company, and then in 1968 BET sold out to the Transport Holding Company, who were nationalised, and that paved the way for the creation of the National Bus Company, of which East Yorkshire became a subsidiary, and that came into being on the 1st of January in 1969. Probably the most famous feature of East Yorkshire buses, and dare I use the word iconic, I know it's overused nowadays, but I think it's probably justified in this case, was the Beverly bar roof that you can see on the vehicle that we're looking at now. This was designed to allow buses to pass through the medieval North Bar in Beverly, which we can see here. This shot was taken in approximately 1982. The vehicle passing through is Daimler Fleet Line 872 RAT 872G, which was the last vehicle delivered to East Yorkshire that was modified to pass under the bar. It was supposed to be withdrawn after this event, so it was a special running day to mark that withdrawal. There were various preserved vehicles alongside it running through the bar. You can see one of them just through the archway to the right. And I remember the event quite well. I did travel through the bar on the upper deck of a Beverly bar preserved vehicle, but I can't remember what year it was exactly. I think it was 1982. As it was extremely premature. 872 remained in service and wasn't withdrawn until 1991. And indeed, identical vehicles 857 and 866 were reinstated shortly afterwards, and they did a few years extra service themselves. If you look at the shape of the bar that the bus is passing through, you can contrast it with the shape of the roof on this bus, and that explains why they were shaped as they were. So the first Beverly bar roofed double-deckers were delivered in 1934. Various bodybuilders built vehicles to the design, including Brush and Eastern Coachworks, but the bus we're looking at, number 498, registration JAT466, was a Leyland PD1A, delivered in 1950 with bodywork by Charles Rowe of Leeds. It's pictured in Saturday Market in Beverly, which was the terminus for bus services in the town before the bus station was built at Sow Hill. Now, strange as it might seem nowadays, because on such a famous feature, East Yorkshire were quite embarrassed by the shape of the roof, and they sought to hide it, which is what the white band was in aid of, above the upper deck windows. They painted the area white to try and disguise the shape of it for people viewing it from the pavement down below. As I say, they were quite embarrassed by it for some reason. Another feature of East Yorkshire buses of the period, although not quite as famous as the Beverly bar roof, was the various methods employed to avoid having to wind the blind. This bus is on the Hull to Beverly service via Dunswell and Woodmansea. You can see just about Dunswell and Woodmansea in the intermediate blind there. That would remain on display all the time. But this, that looks like a horizontal bar underneath the destination, was actually a hinged flap. When the bus got to Hull, the flap would be sprung upwards, and it would cover the word Hull and expose the word Beverly. So the bus could run back to Beverly and you wouldn't have to wind the blind up. When it got back to Beverly again, they'd hinge the flap back down. It would cover the word Beverly and expose the word Hull again. And as you can see, they had the same system on the side blind as well. Another bus pictured in Saturday Market in Beverly, presumably on the Hull to Beverly service, is Yellow Peril, as they were known because of the coach livery that they carried. Leyland PD2 with rear body, number 575, registration MKH84. They were delivered with high back seats and platform doors, and they were intended when they were new for express services. They operated among other routes on the Hull to Newcastle service, but passengers complained about them because if you were sitting in the window seat upstairs, you had to sit with your head craned over to one side. As you can see, the taper for the Beverly bar roof began halfway up the windows, so you had to sit with your head leaning to one side, and that became uncomfortable on long journeys. You've got to remember as well, there were no motorways in the 1950s, so the route to Newcastle was up the A1079 to York and then along the A19, which was a single carriageway. So it would be a very uncomfortable journey. As a result of that, they were taken off the longer distance routes and they were put onto local bus work, as this one appears to have been done here. The driver would have had to wind the blind because it only had a single line blind because it was intended for express services. So yeah, they were downgraded to bus duties, and most of them later received bus livery. As we can see on vehicle 580, registration MKH89, it still retains its higher back seats, but it's in the normal bus livery, and that's pictured on the parking area behind the bus station at Hull, which was known as the Muck on account of its rough surface. Not quite sure if it's got a broken destination blind or whether it just didn't carry the appropriate destination, but it's got a paper bill stuck in the destination aperture, circular via Willoughby and Anlaby, and it's got a repeater next to the door there. These buses weren't fitted with a side blind. So another row-bodied Leyland PD2, but this time delivered as a bus, is fleet number 612, registration NRH223, and that was delivered in 1953. By this date, the hinge flap had been done away with. There was a two-part destination blind instead. And this bus is pictured parked in Hull bus station between runs to the Long Hill estate via Holderness Road. That was one of the handful of services in the city that were operated by East Yorkshire. Now, contrary to popular belief, not all the buses in the East Yorkshire fleet had Beverly bar roofs. There were two low railway bridges in the territory, one at South Cave on the routes towards Goole and Selby, and one at Hornsey Bridge on one of the routes to Hornsey, and they required Lowbridge vehicles. So the centre of the roof on the Beverly bar buses was too high to pass beneath the low bridges, and therefore conventional Lowbridge buses were purchased, including this one, number 632, registration SRH632, pictured on the Muck in Hull, between journeys to World Road and other of the city services operated by East Yorkshire. And in the background you've got a corporation bus in the well-known streamlined livery. So the Lowbridge buses were too high to fit under the Beverly bar, so they couldn't go under Beverly bar, and the Beverly bar buses couldn't go under the low bridges. Now, if they were at the depots where they were delivered new to, that wasn't a problem. Ellerton depot ran under the bridge at South Cave, and Hornsey depot ran under the bridge at Hornsey. However, later in life the buses were transferred to Anlaby Road in Hull, where they worked on local services, and the schedulers would have had to be careful not to send them on routes under Beverly bar because they couldn't fit. It must have been quite confusing for the schedulers actually, because, as I say, all the fleet numbers were lumped in together. So as you can see, this was fleet number 632. Shortly we're going to see fleet number 635, which has got a Beverly bar roof. So they would have had to be on the toes to make sure they didn't send a bus that couldn't fit down the route. So you wait ages for a picture of 632 and then two come along at once. Here's a view of the other side of it on a local service again in Hull. Just carrying the blind circular, the other blinds wound off. So hopefully they were going to wind on where it was going at some point before it set off on its next journey. And as we mentioned, here's vehicle 635. It's running down Car Lane in Hull on its way into the bus station from Ellerburn Avenue on the North Hull estate. And that's one of the other city services that was operated by East Yorkshire. The bus registration VKH35 was a 1956 AEC Regent 5 with Willowbrook body. As you can see, it was built to the Beverly bar profile. Something I didn't mention, going back to 632, the Lowbridge buses didn't have the white band above the windows because they didn't need to disguise the embarrassing, as East Yorkshire thought of it as, shape of the roof. But yeah, back to 635, you can see it's got the advert on the side for the South West Clipper. That was a service that was jointly worked by East Yorkshire and various other companies, made its way from Hull and various other Yorkshire cities and towns, down I think through Birmingham to Cheltenham and then along to the southwest. You can just see it's advertising Torquay alongside the word Clipper there. and that was one of the jointly worked express services that were the forerunners of the later National Express system. So another Regent 5 now, this time with a row body. This is 652, registration WAT 652. And this bus was new in 1957. It's seen outside the factory at Crossgates in Leeds, the Charles Rowe factory. So it had just been built, it was brand new at this point. And Rowe were in the habit of taking official photos of all the buses they built, and then the customer, in this case East Yorkshire, could request copies of them, which they had to pay for, I believe, but they could ask for copies of the vehicles, photographs. East Yorkshire did buy the photos for this one. It was the first of the row-bodied Regents to be delivered, I believe. So they did actually buy the official photo, and this came from East Yorkshire's archives. They were just about to be thrown in the skip one day, when luckily my now late father intervened and managed to save this picture. East Yorkshire themselves were in the habit of taking official photos of the buses when they arrived as well. They'd put them on the front of the garage at Anderby Road in Hull. And that remained the case while Peter Shipp was in charge after deregulation and privatisation, right through until the company was sold to Go Ahead in 2018. Happily 652 has been preserved here. It's pictured at an unknown gathering alongside a ex-Rochdale Regent and an unidentified Plaxton Supreme bodied coach. Another vehicle to pass into preservation was this, the unique Albion Aberdonian in the East Yorkshire fleet. Fleet number 674, registration VKH 674. It had a Park Royal body. It was new in 1958 and it was purchased for use on narrow roads around Pocklington and allocated to Pocklington Depot. It's pictured here in Piccadilly in York, waiting to return to its home depot. When it was withdrawn in 1969, it became a left luggage office at the bus station in Scarborough, initially for East Yorkshire, and then United took over the running of the left luggage facility along with the bus. It passed into preservation in 1975, and as far as I'm aware, it's still preserved today. We've got a run of buses that passed into preservation. This one is 692, registration 6692KH, a 1960 Harrington-bodied Leyland Tiger Cub. East Yorkshire named the coaches after stars, or in the Star series should I say, and this beautiful vehicle was named Pocklington Star. It's seen here in preservation days. It was owned at the time by Neil Birch, who was a friend of my father's. This picture was taken about 1989-1990. Neil had kindly offered us an evening run just around and about on the bus. Unfortunately, we only got a few minutes into it and then the vehicle developed a fault. And here it's pulled over on the A164 at Willoughby, with Neil looking underneath it and my father looking on. Unfortunately, the fault couldn't be fixed, so we were returned home and the bus limped back to its base, which at the time was at Ropery Street in Hull, just off the Hesel Road. We did have a couple of very enjoyable runs on the bus though, whilst Neil owned it. We went to Sandtoft gathering 1 year in it, and also to the rally at Halifax. Neil sold the bus on and it passed to other owners. Unfortunately, the latest photo I saw of it was more or less derelict, but it was apparently waiting to be restored again, so hopefully it will be restored and it will return to the former glory that it's seen here at some point in the future. So by the 1960s, the chassis of vehicles were becoming lower, so the full Beverly bar roof wasn't required. And you can see this here on the vehicle in the middle, 1963 AEC Bridgemaster with Park Royal body. The Bridgemaster was a semi-integral, so it was basically, instead of a separate chassis and body, it was kind of all one structure. But this vehicle is 747, registered 3747RH. As you can see, the only modification needed to get it to pass through the bar was to rake the upper deck windows inwards. So you can see the slightly strange profile of the upper deck. On a normal Bridgemaster, that would be straight up. But despite the fact it didn't have the full Gothic style roof, it still had the white bands on to try and disguise the shaping of the roof. And this is yet another bus to have passed into preservation. It's seen in preservation days between a Grimsby Cleethorpes Bridgemaster. That's NJV 995, the only one of its type I believe to be converted to open top. And Albion Aberdonian 674 standing next to it, showing East Cottingworth on the blind, which is a route it would have done on its narrow lanes from Pocklington that we mentioned earlier on. Incidentally, East Yorkshire had the largest fleet of Bridgemasters of any of the customers. They had 50. Nobody bought as many as that. but they were low enough to pass under the low bridges at South Cave and at Hornsey as well, so they were a kind of jack of all trades. They could go on any route. So finally the scheduler's life became a little bit more easy. Now we're to a vehicle that wasn't preserved. This one is actually a postcard showing vehicle 772, registration 9772RH. This was a Leyland Leopard with Willowbrook body, delivered in 1964. It was a dual purpose vehicle, so it could be used as a bus or a coach, although it did have a single width coach doorway. And it's pictured here in Wellington Street bus station in Leeds. It's not clear because the intermediate blind has been wound off whether it's arrived on an express service, because they were used on known as Yorkshire Services duties, which ran from places like Hull, Leeds, Doncaster, Sheffield, down to London and Birmingham and places like that. Again, one of the forerunners of the National Express network. So it's not clear if it's reached Leeds on one of those or if it's on the stage services that came to Leeds from Bridlington and Hull via York. And then the final shot of this video, slightly after the period we've been looking at. This must be after 1971 because that's when 889 was delivered. We're looking at 2 Daimler Fleet Lines standing on the muck in Hull. On the left is vehicle 825, registration MAT 825F, with an ultra low height Park Royal body. And then on the right is 889 WKH 889J, delivered in 1971 with a body by Alexander. So 825 is the same type of bus as 872 that we saw earlier on in the presentation. You can't really tell from this angle with it painted blue, but the upper deck of this was raked in like the bridge master that we've just seen, and that was the modification needed to pass under the bar at Beverly. Other than that, the bus was an ultra low height, as I said, 13'5" high. So raking the upper deck windows in slightly was the only modification needed to get it underneath the bar. By the early 70s, the height restrictions had gone from the East Yorkshire area. In 1970, a new road was built in Beverly that bypassed the bar and allowed full height vehicles to operate the bus services through the town. And then in the mid-60s, the railway lines at South Cave and at Hornsey had been closed and the bridges dismantled, so they'd lost their height restrictions as well. So as a result, by the time 889 came along in 1971, full height vehicles could be used by East Yorkshire on any route. So 889 had an Alexander body built to the height of 14'6". It's one of the last of the batches to be delivered in the full traditional livery. That would shortly be swept away, first by blue and white in National Bus Company style, and then from 1974 onwards by poppy red and white. So the next part of the series we'll look at some National Bus Company era photographs from the 1980s. And then we've got a special feature on the Route Masters for part 3. Part 4, I think, will look at the early deregulation days, and then we'll move on through the 90s into the 2000s. So please watch out for the other ones in the series. Please feel free to like and subscribe. As always, thank you for watching and take care of yourselves. I will see you again soon. Bye for now.